So this morning we're continuing in our series called Relation Shipwrecks, and we have come to a topic this morning that might best be represented by those famous battleships of the Civil War. Do you remember the Monitor and the Merrimac? Maybe some of you guys made a little diorama or something like that for school. You had a little fort craft thing you made, and you learned that this was the first battle of the ironclads. The South had already commissioned and created a devastating weapon. And this weapon was a ship clad with iron. So it would simply run into the enemy forces, blast away at will, and could not be sunk by normal ships. So, of course, the North, understanding the incredible damage that this would cause, created their own ironclad. And that Monitor came in and finally found its way into battle with the Southern ship, and away they went. In a civil war where brothers were turned against brothers, where families were ripped apart, these two ironclads met for battle to determine whose naval supremacy would win the day. And they pounded, and they pounded, and they pounded, and history says nobody won. They couldn't penetrate each other's armor. One couldn't win or outmaneuver. And so it was a draw as the two ships, badly beaten up, limped away to fight another day. And for many people, that is exactly how their marriages feel. It's a relentless pounding away. And in the environment where family ought to be knit together, where two people should most intensely be woven together as one, we find them pounding away over the years. Boom, 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 thinking that somehow unity and peace will be obtained. Somehow a joining of forces will happen, an ending of hostilities as we continue to pound away uselessly. For it's not a surprise why some people would say that Adam and Eve had the perfect marriage. Adam, of course, didn't have to hear about all of the other men that Eve could have married, being the only one, and Eve never had to hear about what a good cook Adam's mother was, because none of those things had existed at the time. You know, we understand, of course, that marriage has all of its benefits and challenges. Some have called it a three-ring circus. You know, the first is the engagement ring, and the next is the wedding ring, and after that comes suffering. And that's all that remains as we continue to see the challenges sort of rip people apart. I'm going to try to get all of my jokes out of the way up front, because if love is blind and marriage is in fact an institution, then that makes marriage an institution for the blind. And so if you're single here, you should listen to last week's message and just really wonder if this is for you. And yet we look around and we think, why is it that this relationship that ought to be a symbol of the love that Jesus has for us, the scriptures tell us that, why is it that it is so often filled with challenge and strife and hurt and suffering? There are few relationships in this world that can inflict so much pain and hurt and, surprisingly, ironically, loneliness as the marriage relationship. And yet, we come to the scriptures and we find some very compelling guidelines, instructions, and commands to help us know what it means to live. Now, what I'm going to do today, I got to give a little bit of like a disclaimer here. This message this morning is going to be a little bit unusual. Normally what I do is we find a big text, we try to distill its main idea, we take that main idea and we apply it to your lives today. And we try to stick with one big idea to help us kind of focus in on something. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys an assumption, two principles, two large acronyms with all sorts of subpoints, two questions, and I'm going to develop none of them very well. And so structurally, this is going to be a very, very different sort of a thing. But my hope in this is to create a tool with you that is going to help us. So I'm going to ask a couple of you to hand out. Could you guys come over here and hand these out to everyone? This is going to be a tool. You want to just hand those out for me? That would be great. You want to kind of hand these out on this side. Just make sure everybody gets one. Even if you are not married and you plan on never, ever, 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 ever being married, you're going to find that some of these principles are essential for relationships between men and women. And so they'll have application in your life. Even though many of my examples will be more catered toward the marriage relationship, you're going to begin to understand the opposite sex with a little bit more clarity at the end of today. So you're going to need a pen and you're going to need to kind of keep up as I kind of blow through a lot of these things a little bit rapidly. And here's my hope. My hope is at the end, you're going to have an outline that you're going to be able to use to help you explain, help you examine your own relationships. Now, many of the examples that you're going to come up with later are going to be particular to you. I'm going to give you some baseline principles. You guys are going to be able to work through those as couples and begin to figure out some of those things. I also want to say one other thing before I dive in. If, in fact, at the end of this, there is some consensus that you guys say, I feel like these are important principles for my life, for my marriage, for my future marriage. If you feel that way and you want us to go deeper on these topics somewhere, sometime, on the back of your connection card at the end of the service, I'm going to encourage you to just make a little note about that. Write something like love and respect at some point during the service. And when we collect those, if a number of you are interested in taking this topic further, then we'll do that. We'll pick up an evening for a seminar or something like that, and we'll do a little discussion that has to do more like this. All right, so we're going to jump right in here. Our text that we're going to be looking at, one of them is Ephesians 5:33. Ephesians 5:33. St. Paul is writing, and he says, however, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. This is one of those curious things because, of course, he is telling us that a husband's got to love his wife and a wife has to respect her husband, but we don't see the reverse claim. There isn't, like, people are like, well, why doesn't that reverse? Why doesn't the husband have to respect his wife? Does that mean he doesn't have to? Why does it that the husband is being told one thing and the wife it doesn't really make sense in our sort of egalitarian? What I think is going on here, and this is kind of the main assumption, if you look at the top of the sheet where it says assumption, I think that there is a dominant way that men and women, perhaps not everyone, but the majority of men and women will experience love, respect, and acceptance in this world. And I think that there are some distinctions between them that Paul is trying to get at. You see, for some women, most women, love comes more naturally. You might even argue that for men, respect can come more naturally. But love for men may not come as naturally, and respect for women may not, or respect from women may not come as naturally. And I think Paul is trying to say here that the assumption is that women need love, men need respect. Women need love, men need respect. Now, this is a dominant idea and theme, okay? I'm not talking about all the particulars, and I think you can make a great case, and you'll see even as I develop this, that the reverse is also true. But I think that there is an inherent misunderstanding that we often have in how a person experiences love or respect, and I think it's largely based, not entirely, but largely based on gender. So that's my assumption I'm working with. I can't develop it much more than that right now, but that's my assumption I'm working with, based on Ephesians 5. Principle number one. Now, there's two principles I'm going to give you, and these have to kind of be a part of everything we talk about for the rest of the morning here. Principle one, you cannot get what you want from people by depriving them of what they need. You cannot get what you want from people by depriving them of what they need. Why is this important as we begin? Because most folks will tell you something like this. You ask a husband, why are you not being loving to your wife? Well, because she is not lovable. There's something that she has done, something she has said, some way she has treated me. Women would say a similar thing. Why don't you respect your husband? I'll respect him when he is good and respectable. So you feel like you're going to get love by not respecting him? Because if you really are after love, I'm pretty sure that disrespect is not going to be getting you on that path. You can't actually get where you want to go as an individual or as a couple if you are depriving people of what they need. This is obviously applies everywhere in life, but we're talking specifically here about the couple. So, principle number two, unconditional love and respect for Jesus is the reason for our unconditional love and respect for others. What does this mean? It seems as if this idea of I will when she, I will when he, is at the core of many of our ongoing conflicts. Think about that for a moment. You guys are in a bit of a fight, something's going wrong in the relationship, and you say, as soon as you stop doing this, I will start doing what you've asked me to. And of course, the other one is saying some version of that. When you, I will. Nobody wants to go first. Nobody wants to yield. Nobody wants to seek the reconciliation. Nobody wants to be out there on a limb. And because of that, we hold it over people's heads to say, you will or I won't. If you don't, neither will I. Who's going to make the first move? You will. You will. Or yous will, if you watch Cake Boss. Yous will. The plural, like you, all, y'all will. Because your obedience to Christ is what actually motivates your next move. See, you feel like you can show respect or not based on their behavior. But Jesus says, no, actually, you're going to respect because, well, you respect me. And I've told you this is what your next step is. You say to me, I'm not going to love my wife. Then I ask, but Jesus told you to love your wife. Who are you answering to? Who is your audience? If Jesus has told you to love your wife, then love her, period. And if you have unconditional love for Jesus developing in your heart, if you have unconditional respect for Jesus, then that will overflow and give you the power and the motivation and the reason for showing unconditional love and respect for your spouse. Now, I want to tell you the little phrase here that might be a little troubling, particularly for some of the ladies here. Unconditional love is easy for us. We buy it. We feel like, well, that's a natural and a good thing. You be unconditionally loving. We tell people this all the time. It's part of the Christian life to be unconditionally loving. We don't as readily see respect in that category. For some reason, respect feels like it ought to be earned. There are many examples, though, throughout the Scriptures where respect isn't earned. It is given unconditionally, based on some larger principle. That's what I'm getting at here. I'm hoping that in the same way that a woman says, I feel like my husband ought to love me unconditionally, in the same way she can get to the point where she starts to say, I guess I have to respect him unconditionally as well. It's a lot easier to see love fit in this category than it is to see respect fall into this category. All right, so now we're going to jump into the acronym. I decided to start with the men first, and I kept your acronym shorter. I don't want to explain why, but there's some story in there. I decided to keep it a little bit shorter for you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work through this acronym here, and we're going to give you a couple of quick hits, a couple of big major themes, 4 major ideas and themes that will help you love. I want to put a little bit of flesh on what it means to love your spouse. Now you're going to take these ideas and you're going to go home and you're going to actually talk about them. You're going to say, is this true? Does this really work for us? What does that look like in our relationship? What are the details? How do I flesh that out? So this is just going to be a tool for you to begin to understand that. So the very first thing, men, that you have to do, L, is lay down the law. Men, did you really just write that down? That is totally a joke. You see, and herein lies the problem. That was totally a joke. Do not write that one down. Did you hear the groan? You can't. You do not. It is actually let her in. Let her in. Is that a little better, ladies? All right, listen, I'm going to do everything in my power to get all of you upset here this morning. So, just work with me here and cut me some slack. Let her in. So many men, they want to say, listen, you're so sensitive. You're being way too sensitive on this thing. And you know what? Maybe she is being sensitive. And of course, that is actually part of the beauty of a woman, is that she's sensitive, more sensitive, hopefully, in many ways, than you can imagine, because that's how we complement each other. There are things that drive her, and now here's the thing, a woman will often read her own emotional being, as we all do, her own emotional health and being back into you and your responses. Right or wrong, they often read them back in. So men are trying to do a different kind of emotional dance, and unless you let her in, she will have very little recourse but to misunderstand your attitudes, moods, intentions, anything like that. You're not as easy to read, men, as you think. And your wives, your fiancés, are not nearly as gifted at reading past the front that men put on as you think they are or you think you are. You're just not as good as you think. There's a lot going on inside a man that for either hardwiring or for cultural reasons, we have determined is off limits to much of the world. And so we close off and we become walls that are difficult to pierce. Men, if you want your wife to feel loved, then you will learn how to let her in. You've got to have an openness, a type of closeness that goes beyond what you might be comfortable with. A type I'll give you one example. Let's say you're coming home, it's been a rough day, you're in a foul mood. You guys finally connect in those first few moments, and you're just a grump. It would be difficult for a woman not to interpret that as something wrong with the relationship and something that she has caused to do this, which might cause anxiety, frustration. It might be nothing more to her than, look, what a grump. Like, what now? Like, now he's getting... But what if there was a moment where you where you could let her into your emotional thinking, what you're feeling and experiencing? What if you were able to say, listen, rough day, we can talk about it later. You know, if you have kids, maybe we'll talk about it after the kids are asleep. I will let you know this, it's nothing to do with us. I'm just in a foul mood. What would be wrong with that? You feel like she's going to know that? Why? Maybe she's already got other issues, other insecurities that she's wondering about as to what's going on in the relationship. She wants to analyze the relationship. So she is through your behavior. And your behavior might be misleading if you're not willing to let her in. Women often want an emotional closeness, which they'll experience through an openness on your part, letting them see a little inside. I know that for many men, that's like, we can't do that. We've been taught to be strong, and that means we don't have emotions. All of that's just crap. So it's not like none of that actually plays into this. We're talking about allowing people to see into your heart in a way with a level of transparency to let her in. All right. Observe her reality. It's been said that marriage is an investment that pays dividends if you pay interest. And here's the kicker. Women really do want you to read their minds. Did you know that? They really do. They have an ability to do this, and they expect it from you. So that means when, short of a divine gift on your part, I'd asked a few of the ladies over the course of the last couple of weeks, what they feel about, someone who's, able to sort of connect and see the picture. And whenever we got into issues of mind reading, all of the women pretty much said, oh yeah, I would love for them to see this, to know this, without me asking. Men are, of course, like, well, how am I supposed to do that if you haven't asked? I will gladly help with the garbage or the laundry or whatever it is that needs. I will gladly take the kids out because they're in your hair. I will gladly do that if you'd say it. And she's, of course, saying, if you were to observe my reality, you would know these things. You would be able to see it. It would be obvious to you. You have to observe her reality. This is the area of like consideration and thoughtfulness and those kinds of things. If you want a quick little way to kind of begin to observe her reality, then bring your understanding into this game and listen. I'll give you a good example here maybe. You come home and you guys are having a very busy week. Now it's a Saturday morning and the kids are kind of, frenetic. And so now what's going to happen? Well, she actually is at her wit's end. She's ready to be, what did my wife said the other day? So it was a long day with the kids, and she's like, yeah, I'm done parenting for the day. That was it. She was just done parenting for the day. That's pretty much a subtle way of her saying, you better step it up here. And I had like 3 minutes before the kids went to bed, so I thought I could handle it. She's just sort of done parenting for the day. Now, she wants to talk to me, Cheryl wants to talk to me about the kids and what's going on. And you know what I do? As soon as she tells me a problem that's happening with the kids, you know what I do? I come up with a solution. An obvious and easy one, of course, because I'm so smart. And so I just come up with but is she actually not able to solve this one? Unlikely. She's trying to let me into her experience. You do that, you'll begin to observe her reality. Listen, don't fix it. If she wants your help fixing it, she'll ask you for your help in fixing it. She most likely wants to talk about it. Listen, it's great, you don't have to fix it, that's already a benefit. And not only that, you'll start to get inside her head a little bit. You'll start to see the kinds of things she's thinking and feeling. All right. Value her above all else. I know that some of you guys think that marriage is a very expensive way to get your laundry done for free. But that is at the heart of some of the difficulties that we have. Women often feel undervalued, underappreciated. They often think that much of what they do goes unrecognized. And in fact, it is the case. Value her above all else. This has to do with a public and a private affirmation of who she is and what she does, the role she plays in your life, if you have kids, in the lives of your kids, is huge. I can't tell you how many ladies have told me just how significant and meaningful. They'll remember it if it happened years ago often. They'll remember a time where a husband said something in front of other people about something they appreciated or valued about her. They'll remember it. Some of you ladies are right there like, I remember like 18 months ago, we were at a dinner party and my husband said something about this. Think about it, 18 months ago, they still remember it, and that's the last example they came up with. I mean, never mind, I don't even want to go into that. This is why we do, moment making. That's why birthdays and anniversaries and special occasions are so important, because it isn't just the gift. It's not that. That's not it. You guys know that. The ladies know this. I hope you guys know this. It's about saying we value you above all else. We value you above all else. And that's a huge part. You've got to figure out what valuing her above all else means to her. E, establish your faithfulness. Establish your faithfulness. Women often don't think in terms of loyalty, but they regularly think in terms of faithfulness. And there's at least two categories that are important to them. One, you've got to make certain that your lady knows that you are a one-woman man. You hear that, men? What are you doing to violate that for her? What is it like when you're out flirting with that waitress or your secretary, or she catches you immersing yourself in pornography? What do you think's going on here? We're not even talking about blatant adultery and anything like that. You're saying to her, you're not enough for me. I need other stuff. I need other inputs sexually. Really? It's not going to establish your faithfulness. You also might think of it in terms of conflict. Women love security. It's part of their wiring. They love security. Not the kind that most of you think. Most are like, well, if I make a lot of money, we'll be secure. We'll have a retirement. They want relational security. It's tied to both your sexual fidelity. It's also tied to your ability to remove conflict, your peacemaking skills, your ability to say you're sorry. You know how many times men just quickly put the divorce word up on the table? They're trying to create instability in the relationship to show, you need me, you don't want this. Why are you jeopardizing the foundation of this relationship? Why are you going there? Why are you adding that kind of relational insecurity? You need to establish your faithfulness so that your wife knows beyond shadow of a doubt that you are there for her forever and for good. No matter what, sickness and health, that kind of a thing. All right. Ladies, you're more sophisticated, you say, than men, so I've given you a longer list. Here are some ways that you can respect your guy. Rely on his insight. That's the R. Rely on his insight. Yeah, we live in a culture that really just trashes the male role model. Look for a good example of an honorable man with integrity who works hard for his wife and his family on TV. Look for that. Just not that many. The man often plays the buffoon. And many of you women have bought into this. You think because you have intuition, he has very little to add to the conversations related to your life. And you do have great intuition. Men also have an amazing amount of skill in their own way to see the world, to perceive reality, and to learn to rely on their insight is a key way of showing respect. Some of you women are already thinking, wait, but I'm actually just better and smarter than him. That's sort of the point. That's sort of the thing that I want you to challenge in your own thinking. There has been a great exodus of the male psyche engaging in their relationships, in part because they learned early on and rendered it, for some reason, surrendered it early on and decided to check out. Because, she knows better with the kids, she does this better, she's better in the spiritual formation, she's better in... We're abdicating our responsibilities to our wives and our families at that point, and our communities. E, enjoy his friendship. Enjoy his friendship. This is something that maybe some of you ladies haven't quite understood yet about men. They actually like friendships. I know that a lot of men don't actually have great friendships. That's one of the other issues that is kind of dominant in this world today, in our society, I should say. But men really do want you as a friend. They want their spouse to be their friend. Now, for many women, that would mean going out to a coffee shop, sitting across the table from each other, holding hands, talking about the relationship and the kids and the future and the upcoming vacation and emoting. That may not actually be how a man would experience this. And you might say, well, I really need him to meet, that's part of the closeness, and it is. But my experience has been that women more want men to accommodate their experience of connectedness and closeness and friendship, and women are less inclined, because the idea of sitting out there working on the car engine with a beer doesn't really appeal. But did you know that men could spend 5 or 6 hours with another guy, split a six-pack, have like 100 words exchanged between them, and feel like they're better friends at the end of it? Isn't that weird to you? I mean, ladies are like, wait, but no conversation? No talking about that? No, if you talk about the relationship, men think there's a problem with it. You want to talk about the relationship, but they're like, wait, that means there must be an issue. You're like, no, I'm just checking in. No, you're not checking in. You're looking for problems. I don't want it. We go down this road, we're going to end up in an argument. Let's just hang out and do nothing. Sometimes, a husband will say, hey, why don't you come watch some TV with me? Those are overtures. They're looking for relationship. They're looking for connection in a way that you might not be inclined to experience it. But I bet if you gave it a shot, you'd be surprised. Running errands together, men often view that, not shopping, but men often view running errands together, accomplishing tasks together, doing projects together. This is something Cheryl and I do. We love this. And I don't know that she loves it. I think I love it, and she does it because she knows that I love it. And so I think that's just a big part of what happens. All right. Enjoy the friendship. Keep that in the forefront. S, seize the sex. You knew it was coming. 1 Corinthians 7 tells us, 1 Corinthians 7 says, the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone. Did you read that? But also to her husband. This is in the Bible. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come again together, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now listen, the New Testament was written in Greek. If you were to read this in the Greek, you would see that when he says do not deprive each other, he's really saying you have to have sex every day. I'm actually just kidding about that. I really wish it said that. But it doesn't say that in that kind of detail. But you sort of get the point here, is that for many women, all of the variables have to be just right for them to feel like sexual creatures within the marriage relationship. Everything else has to fit together. For a man, people think that, and for some reason, society and women often think that this is the less noble route. For many men, sex actually is a gateway into the relationship as well. There is a fulfillment and a respect, and it goes beyond the physical. There is something emotional. There is a connectedness that takes place. We always talk about the whole, the cuddling and the sex thing. Why can't we just cuddle without it leading to something else? It's like a man could make the argument, why don't we just have sex and it lead to nothing else? Or, better yet, why isn't that the way to get into cuddling? Like, why can't that be the trajectory? Oh, well, that's not the way you experience it. But that doesn't mean that it isn't something that marks for a man an important part of who he is in this world. So just, there's obviously, I'm doing all of these things at great risk of not giving nearly enough information and 1,000 criticisms. Hear it for what I'm trying to say, and see if there's some truth in this in your relationship. Publicly affirm him. That's P. Publicly affirm him. I heard a woman say that every time she finds Mr. Right, her husband chases him away. That's not really what we're talking about. You throw out those kind of jokes enough, and I can guarantee you, no matter what kind of sense of humor your guy has, he's not going to find them enjoyable for long. My experience is that many men can have a good sense of humor and take, kind of even be the butt of a joke. If you like to be a joker or anything like that, that's good. I think that's healthy. There are only a handful of men that enjoy being disrespected publicly. I haven't met many of them, and I'm not sure I like those who do. So think about that. A woman who's criticizing her husband behind his back, in front of others, in front of him, trying to tear down who he is, not great stuff. Very, very toxic. I feel like if that's only the negative side of things. What about the positive side? It's like when you're out, Cheryl will tell a story about something that happened and something she's proud of me at, and all of a sudden you see like the chest puffing up, yeah, I sort of get it done, there's something about this. Now, whether you want, maybe it's culture, maybe it's not, maybe you think, that's the arrogance and the pride. There's something about being recognized and honored by the one you adore, your spouse, your wife. And when that happens, there's something that goes on in the male heart. And I think, it's a big part of, I can't stand it when I hear women, I'm just a little personal note. This is a major pet peeve of mine when I hear wives criticize. I mean, same thing with husbands criticizing their wives, but examine your approach. Examine your approach. For many women, they have decided to push, to attack, to fight. When you do, know that your husband has been trained, maybe through hardwiring and maybe through society, to fight. That's what we do. We're pushed, we fight. We have obstacles to overcome, we conquer them. That's what we will do. Is that the context you want for the resolution of your problems? Don't fight. You've got much better tools at your disposal than raising the intensity of these conflicts. It's very difficult. It takes an unusual man to be able to dial these things back down. He can, and you ought to, men, but it takes a lot more energy to accomplish that when the intensity has been raised. And I would also say, you have the other issue. So women say, okay, they won't fight, but I'll just poke, prod, nag, nitpick. I'll mother him. I'll lecture. Yeah, not so much. That's the quickest way for a guy to be able to tune out that entire frequency. Just not even hear it. I can't. I see your lips moving, but I don't hear anything you're saying. That can very often happen. All right, examine your approach, ladies. Commend his conquest. I'm just going to make a quick comment about this, because it is often the case that a work-life, family-life balance is a source of much tension in marriages, and rightly so. There are many men who are workaholics and neglect their families and other responsibilities because of that. However, I think that we have to be very careful in taking the issues related to work and putting them in opposition to who a man is in his family. Because a man will often view his work as part of what he is doing in this world for his family. There is a great deal of respect and self-value that comes from a man's work. So we have to be very careful in making this distinction and downplaying the importance of those things. They might need help, they might need correction, they might need tweaking, but you don't want to be in opposition to the conquest that is going on in the male heart in this world. And also, a lot of ladies have never even acknowledged that they even recognize or appreciate what it is that a man does for the bulk of his time for the benefit of those that he loves. And trust in his leadership. I don't want to say much more about that, except, I heard that there was a husband and a wife. They discovered that they had religious differences, and when asked, and that's why they got a divorce, and when asked about it, the wife said, well, he thought he was God, and I didn't. And that's a problem when we come into this. And I don't want to hold, this is what a lot of people get upset about, and there's a whole big host of things in here. I think there is a big part of trusting in the leadership of a man that will show that there is respect in that relationship. And there's a whole host of things that we can talk about. Get that out there and let's see what you feel like. In an egalitarian world like ours, with women's earning potential often far outstripping a husband's earning potential, and both having shared responsibilities in the home, these things can work themselves out in very different and unusual ways. But just ask your spouse what they think about that and see where that conversation goes. 2 quick questions for you. Ladies, write down the pink. Men, you can write down the blue. Is my spouse coming across disrespectfully or unlovingly? You can write down the one that is appropriate to you, because he or she is feeling disrespected or unloved. So ladies, is my spouse coming across unloving because he is feeling disrespected? And then, of course, men, is my spouse coming across disrespectfully because she is feeling unloved? If that's the case, then you have a great amount of influence in what happens next. And that's question number 2. Will the next thing I say or do come across as loving or unloving for you men? Or will the next thing I say or do come across as respectful or disrespectful for you ladies? Imagine for just a moment if you were able to stop the craziness of your conflicts and you were to say, wait a second, maybe she's doing this because she feels unloved. And is the next thing I say or do going to encourage that or end it? Is it going to show her that I love her or show her that I don't? In her language. Same thing for you ladies. As we begin to do this, And as we look back and we emphasize the role of Jesus Christ in these relationships, that our obedience is to him first and foremost, then we'll begin to get both the power and the motivation to turn these relationships into the most life-giving and enjoyable relationships that we could possibly imagine. Would you pray with me? Lord, we just ask for you to take these things and start to use them as seeds to generate in our lives an understanding and an increase in both love and respect. I pray, Lord, that you would take these principles from your word, and you would help us to become the best men, the best women, the best husbands and wives that we are capable of through your power, which means we're capable of great things. In Christ's name we ask. Amen.